Congressman Rogers represents district in Alabama. He's a fifth-generation East Alabamian. He's married with 3 children and lives down in Anniston, Alabama. He's an attorney. Mike is a senior member of the House Agriculture Committee and also serves on Homeland Security and Armed Services Committees. It's really important to you understand what I'm about to tell you. In the last few congressional cycles, prepping for this upcoming farm bill, Mike has been a real asset to us in liaisoning agriculture, southern agriculture, with new members of Congress. And as new members are elected, Mike's the first out of the box to host sort of a welcome event for them, bringing us in, introducing us to the agricultural legislative assistants, the member, chiefs of staff, the key players that are going to be involved in the farm bill that are new to Washington and don't know peanut, cotton, rice, sugar, a lot of commodities that we work with. So we're very pleased to have Mike here, and I'm going to turn it over to him now.
Thank you, Bob. It's good to be with y'all today. He got one thing wrong in my bio. I'm not an attorney. I'm a recovering attorney. And I'm trying to stay on the wagon. Listen, what I thought I would do today, because they want me to keep 10 minutes, and I'm happy to do that, but I want to talk a little bit about the Farm Bill and what the lay of the ground ahead of us, and then a little bit about just the general agenda up there and the lay of land there. On the Farm Bill, we're really pleased to have Chairman Conway, who understands our issues from our part of the country, running the committee. He is a very bright and organized fellow. He wants to have this Farm Bill come in on time, which would be nice. This is going to be my 3rd Farm Bill. I'm in my 15th year in Congress, and it gets progressively worse each Farm Bill to try to do this. But we started early. We're going to start, we have listening sessions going now instead of field hearings around the country. Hopefully that will get more participation. But we want to have this one come in on time. But the history of the Farm Bill is pretty bad for farmers. When you go back to when we first started, or the Congress first started working with nutrition programs in order to pass the Farm Bill, it was 1965. And at that time, 50% of the Farm Bill was food stamps and 50% farm programs. You fast forward to the 12th Farm Bill, it was 80% food stamps and 20% farm programs. And I expect it's going to be even harder this time, as we've seen people move into more urban areas and suburban areas. They just, their membership that's representing them in Congress reflects that move. And they just aren't as keen on rural issues as we need them to be. So that does take an effort for us to try to make sure members understand how important it is to work with us. So what we have done in the past, what we're going to do again this cycle, is as members come in, and we're talking about this cycle and right after this next election, try to make sure that if they've got ag interest in their district, that we bring them in, educate them about what's going to happen with the upcoming Farm Bill, and then try to get them to commit to be with us. Because I tell you that the hard vote on the Farm Bill is not in committee. I got on the Ag Committee when I first came to Congress 15 years ago. It is the least partisan committee in Congress. It's not whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It's what part of the country you're from, what kind of crops you got. That's how you build coalitions there. And frankly, it's a pretty pragmatic committee. When we get a Farm Bill finalized, everybody votes for it. There might be 1 or 2 stragglers. I think on the 2 I've had, we had unanimous vote on one and only 1 defection on the other one. He was from California. We don't have very high expectations from California. So we weren't that surprised about him. But I want you to realize how hard it is for us to get people to do right on this. What we had on the last Farm Bill, as far as difficulty passing it, when it got on the floor, it wasn't Democrat, Republican. It was some of the most extreme right-wing members of the Republican Party who became more enamored with these outside groups like Club for Growth and Freedom Works and Heritage Action Pack, who hate farm programs, think they're government giveaways and they want them gone. So some of these folks will be representing ag communities, ag districts, and they come to Washington and vote against the Farm Bill. Then they go home and tell the farmers, well, I was for the farm programs, it was the food stamps I didn't like. And that is too much money in food stamps. That's why I voted against it. Well, that was a load of hooey. They really were against the whole thing. So what my goal in life is, this next farm bill, in addition to doing what we did last time and trying to introduce members who aren't on the committee to the farm bill process and get them to commit, introduce them to folks like your representatives up there, is I want Chairman Conaway to bring the farm bill out of committee and put it on the floor, but bifurcate the nutrition programs from the farm programs. Now, neither one of them's going to pass on their own, but it'll show us who our friends are and who they aren't. Because we'll vote just on food stamps and just on farm programs. And we'll see who votes against the farm programs then. And then they come home and explain to their folks back home whether they're really a true fan or not. And then we'll put them back together and see if we can't pass it. But that's the only way we're really going to know. So that's my number one goal with the next farm bill after passing it, is to make sure we really run some of these folks off who really aren't up there to help us advance the interests of their constituents back home. But having said that, it's going to be a tough fight. I don't want anybody to fool themselves about that. As far as the rest of the outlook for this Congress, and more importantly this year, we have 2-year cycles in Washington. The entire House of Representatives is up every 2 years. The Senate's up. They have 6-year terms, but 1/3 of the Senate's up every 2 years. What you find, it's all cyclical, is the first year of a cycle is when the serious legislating gets done. The second year of the cycle, not so much, because people start qualifying for office in January and February. They have the primaries in the spring, and then campaigning for the general election in the summer and fall. And there's not as much courage in the second year as there is in the first year. So the big stuff that President Trump campaigned on and that people are expecting, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. Now, I'm disappointed that we just passed the 6-month point, and we still hadn't got some of the President's main agenda items passed. But we got a big one done in getting Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court to replace Antonin Scalia. What we've been fussing on primarily up to this point in time has been the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. That finally was passed out of the House and is over to the Senate, and now the House has just finished passing the National Defense Authorization Act. As you heard Bob tell you, Austin and I are both members of the Armed Services Committee. That's a very important piece of legislation that authorizes the Pentagon and all the services, tells them what they can and can't do for the next year. And then we got that out of the House with a big plus up in defense spending. The last president was not a friend of the military, and he really cut it down. Just in strength, the manpower, would not reinvest in equipment and modernization. We really plussed up this year's NDAA to start trying to reverse that trend and make sure our service members have what they need to be successful and come home safe if we get in another conflict in addition to what we're already in. So it was a big deal to get that passed this last week. The Senate has got to get theirs passed. Unfortunately, as you saw, Senator McCain has just been diagnosed with brain cancer, and he's the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, so we don't know if he's going to be back in time to try to get that done in the next couple of weeks, or if he's going to let his next ranking Republican, Senator Inhofe, take over for him. But that's a really big deal. We'll get that passed. Beyond that, after the repeal and replace of Obamacare, we're going to go to tax reform. It is going to be more difficult than the repeal and replace of Obamacare. Don't let anybody fool you. There's a reason why comprehensive tax reform hadn't been passed since Ronald Reagan was president, because it's hard. It's not the reducing the rates that's hard and those kind of structural changes. It's when you start getting into the tax code and try to get rid of everybody's little protective section. It's hard to do. Not impossible. It would be wonderful for the economy if we pull that off. But as I've told the Speaker, I think he needs to to try to shrink down what he's trying to accomplish and try to make it more practical for us to pass it while we still got momentum, so like we do right now. We've then got an infrastructure bill. The president campaigned wanting to start rebuilding our roads, bridges, and transportation infrastructure throughout this country. I think that's the one that's got the best chance, frankly, of becoming law, because the Democrats will vote for that. The labor unions want to see those monies appropriated, and so you'll see the Democrats joining the Republicans to vote for the transportation bill. And then, of course, President's big, beautiful wall. We got to get that. I don't know when that's going to come. My guess is that's going to come later in the year, because once we hit that one, there's going to be some fussing going on in Washington. The Democrats don't want any part of that wall going up, and the Republicans want it bad. So that's kind of the way I see the year unfolding, and I'm hopeful, optimistic that we can get those things done. If we get half of them done, it's going to be a very productive first year for this administration. And I want y'all to think about this. You watch TV and news, whether it's Cablevision or the network news, and you think the sky was falling. The Russians are about to invade, and the president's about to be put in jail, and everything's just awful. Congress is fussing and can't get what they want done as fast as they want to get it done. But I just remind you of this. It was designed to be that way. You look back through the history of this country, every time the Congress and the administration has taken on big issues, it's just like this. From the days our founding fathers were trying to come up with proper wording for the Declaration of Independence, through the Bill of Rights, through whatever we've done up to this point in time. It's always like this when it comes to major legislation. It's supposed to be hard to pass laws, and it's supposed to be really hard to pass major laws. So when you hear on TV that we're fussing, it ought to be music to your ears. Because if you ever see us holding hands and singing Kumbaya, you better hold on to your wallet and your rights. Because they're both in jeopardy. But, and let me close with this. You know, we got a lot of problems in this country. We got the North Koreans wanting to kill us. We got the Middle Eastern terrorists wanting to kill us. We got a lot of problems. But the fact is, you know, before I went to Congress, I had never been anywhere. Since then, I've been all over the world. And there's not a country on this planet that wouldn't change problems with us. We are blessed by God to live in this country with all the freedoms and privileges we have and all the resources. So we need to keep that in perspective when you're watching the news. Or just better yet, just turn the news off. Thank y'all for letting me be with you tonight.
Thank you, Congressman Rogers. Next on the program is Congressman Austin Scott from the 8th District of Georgia. He's in his 4th term. He was originally elected to the Georgia State Legislature when he was 26 years old, so he's been in politics a long time. Small businessman from Tifton, Georgia. Austin is subcommittee chairman on the House Agriculture Committee and a leader on the front line for peanuts. He's always been a supporter, but he will be a key player coming up in this next farm bill. He's married, has 2 children. He and his wife Vivian live in Tifton, Georgia. And if you want to have any questions about his SEC allegiances, if you go in his office, there are a lot of bulldogs there. Austin Scott.
You know Bob's the best lobbyist in D.C. because he knows how much grief I've been catching from my wife playing a practical joke on me and bringing an orange shirt to speak for you all the time. You know, I guess Auburn is AU and there's a great big G right in the middle of them. But you know, Mike Rogers is a great guy, and I wish all the members were like him because he just tells it like it is. And you know, I have to be careful now because sometimes when people say, well, what do you think is going to happen? And I tell them what I think is going to happen and where I think we're headed and what the problems are. That doesn't mean that I think that's where we should be going. I'm just telling you from experience what I think we've got to watch out for and where we've got some problems. And I hope you'll keep that in mind. So I'm pretty plain spoken about what I think the truth is and where the challenges are. And I noticed coming in that the The speed limit was 23 miles an hour. Now, don't you know there was a big argument over 22 or 23 or 24? And I said this last night, some people heard me if you were there. You know, the problem we've got is there's a difference in, and forgive me if there are any kids in the room, I really don't care what the press thinks anymore. But you know, there's a difference in being a stubborn conservative, which I appreciate, and a stupid one that just votes no. And the problem is we've got too many people in Washington right now, like Rand Paul, that would say, well, I'm not voting for a 23 mile an hour speed limit. You can make it 22 or 24. But I'm just not voting for it if it's 23. And so the end result is we have, as Republicans, a non-functioning majority because we've got to select a few people that won't vote for anything. And Mike's absolutely right. They go home and they have these excuses over why they don't vote for things. And I've learned in Washington, comprehensive, that's an old word for nothing's going to happen. People tell you, I didn't vote for it because it wasn't comprehensive enough. You know, simpler is better. Now, base hits win ball games. I can tell you this, in the Georgia-Florida game, the Georgia-Auburn game, the team that gets the most first downs is probably going to win. And I sure hope it's Georgia. God does too. I haven't seen any Twitters from the president this morning. That's pretty much because I don't look at him anymore. But I will tell you this. I do think he's a good man, and I do think he cares about the country. And if you look at what his family is being put through, I think that's where his frustration really comes in. Donald Trump doesn't care what the press says about him. He doesn't care what the lawyers try to do to him. He really doesn't. He cares about the country. But when someone starts attacking your children, that changes the game, right? And that's where his frustration's coming in. And unfortunately, I do think it is a problem for us in getting things done. He's got a little something that he wants. The FAA privatization, his people were talking with me about it the other day, and I'm not a big fan of the FAA privatization concept. But I said, I'll tell you what, if you'll get him to stay off Twitter for 5 days, I'll vote for it. And they just kind of had this blank stare and said, we'll just mark you as a no. So I want to say this. The discussions about Trump and Russia. I'm on the Armed Services Committee as Mike is. If we had asked America, if we had asked you in this room in October of last year and going up to the elections, do you think that the President of the United States should have a direct line of communications with the President of Russia with all of the things that are going on in the world today with regard to Korea, Syria, and the other challenges that we face from a national security standpoint? I think the vast majority of Americans would have said absolutely the President of the United States needs to have a direct line of communication. I think the vast majority of Americans believe that communication needs to exist today. It's just that since it's Trump and the press hates him so bad, they're going to continue to hammer him on it. As someone who looks at the North Korea situation a lot, I was in South Korea not that long ago, and I look at the Syria situation a lot, spend a lot of time on it. I'll promise you, there's no solution. There's no solution in Syria that does not include an agreement between the United States and Russia and how we're going to resolve that problem. There's not one. And so the dialogue between the United States and Russia is extremely important with regard to resolving the situation, and dialogue between the United States and the leadership of China is extremely important in how we resolve the situation with North Korea. Remember this with regard to North Korea. A lot of talk about whether or not that man can hit the United States. I use that term loosely. When I say man, pipsqueak, weeble, I can think of a lot of things that might be better. I hope he's recording this. But we've got to have some help in that part of the world from China. And when you have to have help to resolve a situation, it doesn't mean that you get to dictate 100% of the terms. And we all know that. We're going to have to agree to some things that we don't necessarily like, but that are in the long-term best interest not only of the United States but of the world. 50% of the world's population lives within a pretty small radius of North Korea. As we go forward, a couple of wins, a couple of losses for us on agriculture. Mick Mulvaney's a good friend of mine from South Carolina. He's not an advocate for agriculture. We came in together. Our offices were across from each other. I like him on a personal basis. He's head of OMB right now. He's not an advocate for us. So we're going to continue to work with Mick and try to find where we can find those bridges where we can work across together. Fortunately for us, we have Sonny Perdue as in the USDA, and he is an advocate for agriculture. And so I'll take that. I'll take those cards any day of the week of having Mick Mulvaney and Sonny Perdue up there, because Sonny's going to push back, and he understands the value of the different commodity groups, and he understands that the commodity groups have to work together. So one of my primary concerns as we go forward with agriculture is making sure that we don't get splits among the commodity groups and within the commodity groups. The last thing that I want to happen is for peanuts to become, if you will, the target of some of the outside conservative groups, where they come in and they accuse people of getting payments for acres that were never planted. I can tell you, I think that this accusation is coming. I think the strum roar is going to get louder, and I think one of the big debates in the Farm Bill will be planted acres versus base acres. I can tell you it's coming. We've got a situation in Florida where we have a group of farmers who have organized that are complaining about that particular issue. That's one of those areas where the member of Congress that represents them is on the Ag Committee. And it is going to be a big debate, and I think that those of you in this room have to have that discussion over how we're going to resolve it. The thing, again, that we don't want to do is to become the issue that everybody targets to focus on. So base acres versus planted acres will be a big deal. The discussion of permanent law versus temporary law is another issue that we're going to have some honest discussion about. As Mike talked about earlier, once we go into the next reapportionment cycle, rural America will lose a significant amount of its influence in Congress. I currently represent 24 counties. We have counties that have 3 or 4 members of Congress. And so I represent 24. After the next reapportionment, I will probably represent between 27 and 28 counties. In those metropolitan areas that currently have 3 or 4 members of Congress that represent just those areas, that will be where they pick up the members of Congress. So we're going to have fewer members from the rural areas. It's going to make it that much harder for us as we go forward. There are very few Democrats who support the Farm Bill based on the ag aspect of the bill. Most of them are tied more to the nutrition side of the tide. When we talk about metropolitan Republicans, we have a hard time getting them, in many cases, to come on board. As I finish up some of the political talk and try to take a couple of questions, if you want to, Bob. Mike had a great event the other night where he invited the speaker to come out to the Southern Members Conference. Mike's the head of the Southern Members Conference, which I think is a good indication of how much respect we have for him. When the speaker came in, he stood up and he looked around and he said, "Wow, I didn't realize there were that many of you." And Mike's response is, "Well, our agenda is complete." That's simply what we wanted the speaker to recognize, is how many of us come from the southeastern part of the United States. How many people outside of the southeastern part of the United States really care about cotton or peanuts or the other commodities that you grow. We have to make sure that those other members, especially the members of leadership, understand that we represent a significant block of votes in the House of Representatives, especially on the Republican side of the equation. And I think Mike did a good job of getting that message across to to the speaker the other day. So we'll see what happens, whether we have a continuing resolution or appropriations that passes. I certainly hope we get out of the CR cycle. But as Mike said, I would rather have the problems that we have in the United States than any of the other problems that I see out in the world in other countries right now. With that,
Questions?
I'll let you finish questions or however you want to do it. We get an auctioneer up here, we'll go once, twice, and 3 times. She's sold.
I think we're done. Thank you,
All
Congressman.
right, thank you so much.